Where do you see the Sabbath in the three angels' messages? He is the Creator. Can you separate creation and Sabbath? No, they are intertwined. They interlinked. Yeah, they are together. We also find the Sabbath in another part of the three angels' messages. In worship Him, worship and the Sabbath go together. And then there's another place in the three angels' messages where you find, you didn't know that there's so much of the Sabbath in the three angels' messages. This angel is flying in heaven, and it's saying that there is going to be a worship of God at the end of time, and that worship and the Sabbath have something to do with each other and is also then linked with creation. So when we look at Revelation 14, 6-7, we see that within the context of the end time, the Sabbath features as a prominent part of Revelation 14, which we believe takes place at the end of time. So this is a message at the time of the end. If we now go back to Genesis 2 and there verse 1-3, we find, so the creation of the heavens and the earth and everything in them was completed. It was done. On the seventh day, God had finished His work of creation. So He did what from all His work? He Shabbated from His work. That's the word that's used there in the Hebrew. He rested, or Shabbat. That was what happened right there. And God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy. He made it holy because it was the day when He rested, or Shabbated, same word used there again, from all His work of creation. Adam and Eve experience a Sabbath rest as an ordinance of creation. Was this before or after sin? Before sin. God graciously allows the Sabbath to continue after sin entered Eden. Why? You know, the Sabbath could have ended, could have perished when sin entered. But God graciously allowed the Sabbath, which was a sinless ordinance of creation, part of the plan of God, to continue to exist throughout the ages. As what? For what purpose? Now in sin, before sin, the purpose was fellowship, celebration. The Creator and His creation, the crown of His creation, met together and they had an amazing fellowship. After sin, what purpose did the Sabbath have? Fellowship. God still wanted that fellowship. But what do we find now? We find that there's actually a rift that has come. Sin has brought a rift. Isaiah 59 verse 2 says, your sins have made a wall, a separation, brought a separation between you and me. And so here's a separation that it brings in. But God says the only way that in the sinful state we can and you can cross over that separation, that wall, and we can still have fellowship, is in a period of 24-hour sacred time. And He makes that time holy by setting it apart from the other 6. And He says, this is like a sanctuary of time. And in the sanctuary of time, you can worship me. If this was a specific building like a temple in Jerusalem, in Palestine, how many of us would be able to worship God? Now that He makes this a period of 24-hour time, guess how many of us can enter that sanctuary? Everyone can. You can, I can, we can all enter into the sanctuary and we can experience fellowship, worship with the Creator. Now, is that neat or what? And then we go to Exodus 20, verse 8 to 11. Remember to observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy. He says, remember. Zachar. It's the root words for Zachariah. Remember Yahweh. Remember Him. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, for in 6 days each week. You have 6 days each week for your ordinary work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath day of rest, dedicated to the Lord your God. On that day, no one in your household may do any work. This includes you, your sons and daughters, your male servants, female servants, livestock. Now, I can understand if he says that the sons and daughters may not work, because he wants for the sons and daughters that the purpose of the Sabbath be fulfilled for them too, which is fellowship. But what about the servants, the male and the female servants? Notice he makes sure that the female servants are added in there. It was a male-dominated patriarchal society. But he says, salvation is in this case not just for the male. He says, I want fellowship with every single created person. Eve is as important as Adam in the salvation, my purpose for salvation, for saving them. And I want this relationship, this fellowship with Adam and with Eve, with the male servants and the female servants. But when it comes to the livestock, your cattle, and the foreigners living, what about them? Do they need the Sabbath? Why do the livestock need the Sabbath? Why does the land, as Scripture says later on, have to rest? Why does the land have to have a Shabbat? Guess what? If the land or the livestock don't rest, guess what happens to us? Just ask Rick or anyone else over here, Biff, right at the back there who have horses. You just ask anyone like that, what happens on the Sabbath day with livestock? You still have to feed them. You still have to attend to them. You can't just not do anything with them on the Sabbath, right? I remember when I was a little fellow, 9, 10 years old, I had a cow to milk, and my brother had a cow to milk, and I had to go there, Sabbath or not. I remember get my fingers full of that funny purple grease and milk that cow by hand and fill that bucket and make sure he doesn't put his foot in it. The Sabbath day is a day of rest and fellowship. Everyone within your gates had to enjoy that, because if your livestock or the land doesn't enjoy that, you don't enjoy that. You will be taken up through that. It makes me think of if God wrote the 10 Commandments today, I have an idea He would have said, 6 days you shall rest, and so forth. And this includes your sons and daughters, your male and female servants, your cars, your iPhones, your PCs, your computers. Wouldn't He have said that? Because if those things don't rest, you don't rest. And God knows that. That is why the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and set it apart as holy. Deuteronomy 5 verse 15 brings in another interesting aspect. It says, remember that you once were slaves in Egypt. The Lord your God brought you out with His strong hand and powerful arm. That is why the Lord your God has commanded you to rest on the Sabbath day. He gives the Sabbath commandment and He says, that is why the Lord has commanded you. Why? Because He brought you out as slaves. He delivered you from Egypt. Notice that in Exodus 20 verse 11, he uses those same 3 words, at least in my translation. He says, that is why the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and set it apart as holy. In Deuteronomy, that is why the Lord your God has commanded you to rest on the Sabbath day. The same reasoning. That is why. Except in Exodus, he says the reason is because God is the creator. He created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh. That's why you keep the Sabbath. In Deuteronomy, he says, because God saved you out of Egypt, that's why you keep the Sabbath. He's giving the Sabbath a double meaning, a double motive, a double origin. Why the Sabbath? The Sabbath is there because God made you and He saved you. What a neat thing. So, then we find another verse there, Exodus 31, verse 13. Tell the Israelites, surely you must keep my Sabbaths, for it's a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I am the Lord who sanctifies you, who makes you holy. So, I don't only make the Sabbath holy as time, I make you holy. So God reveals Himself as creator, as deliverer, and sanctifier. Creator, Savior, and He is our sanctification. We have all three there. Ezekiel 20 verse 12 says, He also gave them my Sabbath. He also gave them my Sabbaths as a reminder of our relationship. This is the New English Translation, which is one of those translations which is very, very close to the meaning of the text. And it just brings out, according to theologians, the meaning of what the text is saying. Not necessarily literal, but it really brings out the essence of what it's saying. And he says, I gave you my Sabbaths, what? As a reminder of our relationship, so that they would know that I, the Lord, sanctify them. I love that. And then verse 20, Ezekiel 20:20, treat my Sabbaths as holy, and they will be a reminder of our relationship, and then you will know that I am the Lord your God. Listen to this. Treat my Sabbaths as holy, and they will be a reminder of our relationship, and then you will experientially know. The Hebrew word is yada, that I am the Lord your God. That same little word yada is the same word that's used in Genesis 4 verse 1. In Genesis 4 verse 1 it says, Cain, or Adam, knew his wife, and she became pregnant. Adam yada his wife, he knew his wife, and she became pregnant. How can you know somebody and they become pregnant? Is because this word yada in the Hebrew, this knowing word which says to know God is everlasting life, as John 17:3 says. This knowing is such an intimate knowing. It's an experiential knowing, not just a head knowledge. It's a walk and talk with that person. So God says, I want to know you so intimately that you will know me so intimately as we walk together. And why I created the Sabbath is for that purpose. It's only as you have the Sabbath that it gives you that break from your frenzied time to really have a relationship with me, that you can walk and talk with me and gain that yada, that knowing that is so deep and intimate that it leads to salvation. That it leads to salvation. What have we learned from these scriptures? I noticed 7 points. Happened to be 7. It just worked out to be 7. But I still like it. 7 points about the Sabbath that stand out that we've just looked at. Number 1, the Sabbath indicates that there is a connection between creator and creation. I cannot separate the creation from the creator, or the creator and the creation. Number 2, there's a connection between creation and salvation, as we saw between the Sabbath command in Exodus and in Deuteronomy. Creation and salvation. It's like creation and recreation. Number 3, A creation ordinance, the Sabbath is a creation ordinance before sin entered. It's not something that came in after sin. The Lord said, you know what, you've sinned now, you can't have open communion with me, let's give you a Sabbath now. Now you can spend time with me because you know you really need it in order to be saved. It was God's intended plan to have that walk and talk with Him before sin entered. Sin didn't make a difference to the Sabbath. The Sabbath was always intended for fellowship and relationship building between creator and creature. And so the Sabbath comes in as a creation ordinance. By the way, there are only two creation ordinances that were given before sin. The one was the Sabbath, the other was marriage. And what is marriage? A relationship. And guess what happens if that relationship goes bad? Satan knows that then he just breaks your spiritual relationship with God. And so, we should guard the home, guard the marriage relationship, because that is something which is sacred and is a little microcosm, a little salvation in the small, illustration of this relationship between me and my Father. How do we know that? Well, Jesus says that through Paul in Ephesians chapter 5, where he says, just as husband and wife in that relationship, so the relationship is between Christ and His church. And he makes that beautiful comparison right there. So, what have we learned? Going to number 4, the Sabbath helps us maintain our relationship with Jesus and is an antidote for evolution and salvation by works. How does that work? It works simply because there is a relationship that between the Creator and creation that Jesus created in 6 days and rested on the 7th. There cannot be evolution in a creation of 6 days and the Sabbath. I either have to believe in the Sabbath or in evolution. You can't have both. Does that make sense? You can't have both. If you have evolution, the Sabbath melts away into nothingness. The Sabbath is, if kept, as Ellen White says somewhere in her writings, if kept right from the beginning, there would not have been a heathen worshiper if the Sabbath had been kept. Because the Sabbath is that means to an end. It's that tool, that special time that affords me this, builds this relationship with me, which leads to salvation. And so it's the antidote of evolution. And what about salvation by works? Well, Ezekiel 12 says, the Sabbath is a sign that who sanctifies me, that who justifies me. It's Jesus, that He does it. It's not me that's sanctifying. It's not my good works that I'm doing. I'm becoming so great in sanctification. I'm climbing this ladder and I'm improving because it's all about me. It's all about me. No. He sanctifies me and He saves me. Number 6, the Sabbath is a sign of His covenant relationship with me, says Exodus 31:13. And Ezekiel, by the way. It's a sign of His covenant relationship with me. Number 7, it gives me an identity in Him as Yahweh and Elohim, as Lord and God. The Sabbath gives me an identity. When I know who my Father is, I have an identity. I'm Jerry, the son of Hophni Joubert. He is my Father. I know I have identity. If I'm a child of God, I have identity in knowing who is my Lord and my God. And I can only know that and experience that and know that deep inside through the Sabbath fellowship that I continue to maintain this relationship with Him. Those are the 7 points that to me stand out, but they are foundational for us to understand the time of the end. So, if we now look at the Sabbath in history and prophecy and we go to Revelation, we ask ourselves questions like, what makes the Sabbath so important? Why is it that Satan wants so desperately to destroy the Sabbath, especially in the time of the end? Because he knows that the Sabbath is a means to an end. He knows he can't destroy the end, but if he can destroy the means. It's like in the old Wild West, man, the old Wild West movies. And here the guys, the villains come, and they put some dynamite under the track, and they hold up the train, The train is only a means that transports the goods from point A to point B. It cannot get to its end if it's derailed on the way there. The devil would like to derail the Sabbath, because if he can derail the Sabbath, he knows the Sabbath is a means to fellowship, which means salvation for you and I. If he can derail the Sabbath, he can just derail salvation for so many others. If he destroys the one, he destroys the other. And so, let's have a look at Revelation 12 and 13 and 14. In Revelation 12, Satan seeks to destroy those who keep God's commandments, including the Sabbath. There in the verse 17 of Revelation 12, very last verse there of that chapter. So in Revelation 12, where do I find the Sabbath? In Revelation 13, where do I find the Sabbath? Revelation 14, where do I find the Sabbath? In 12, he seeks to destroy the Sabbath. In Revelation 13, Satan seeks to deflect worship of God to himself, to the beast whom he empowers, and to his image. He uses the symbolic figures of the dragon, which is Satan himself, and he talks about he wants all the people to worship the dragon, which is Satan. The Bible explains that. Revelation says that very clearly. So, the dragon is Satan. He wants to be worshipped. But he also wants the beast and his image to be worshipped, as it says in Revelation 13, in verses 4, 8, and 12. He clearly indicates that. It culminates in a death decree in verse 15 of Revelation 13. For those who refuse to worship the image of the beast. So what Satan is trying to do is he's trying to destroy God's commandment-keeping people in chapter 12. In chapter 13, he tries to break that relationship of worship and giving allegiance to God by saying, give allegiance to other powers, other antichrist powers in this world. And those antichrist powers could be religious powers, they could be economical powers, they could be political powers, as long as it isn't God. Satan is interested in getting our attention away from worshiping God onto worshiping his set up gods. And that's the concept of Antichrist. In Revelation 14, thank goodness, the whole story changes. Now the scenes change. In Revelation 14, it contrasts those who worship God as creator in verse 7, which Amanda read for us today, with those who worship the beast and his image in verses 9 and 11. The first keep God's commandments and worship him on his Sabbath. The second receive God's eternal punishment in verses 10 and 11. It's not rocket science, is it? It's just clearly spelt out there and just says, look, in Revelation 12, the devil wants to destroy God's people. Revelation 13, he wants us to worship somebody else other than God. And then it comes to Revelation 14, he says, worship God. Because there are people that will worship God as creator, keep his Sabbath, worship him on his Sabbath, keep his commandments, and there are others that will worship the beast, but their end will be destruction. And he clearly spells it out. So there you have it. The Sabbath all neatly packaged and tied up, ribbon and all. You worship the right God on the right day. Now you're ready for the time of the end, right? Why not? You know, I think this class is ready to graduate. When I hear that, I think you're coming on. You're ready to graduate now. I'll give you an A for that. Because it's not just about the head. Do I know which day is right, and it's important to know and worship God on the day, obey Him on the day that He says? Yeah, sure. But is it all about just arguing between which day is right and wrong? There's a verse in Matthew 7, verse 21, somewhere there, that says something. In the end of time, some will say to me, but Lord, Lord, haven't we done all these good things? And He will say, I don't know you. Because there's no relationship. That's a sad verse. Let me see if I can put it into context here. Is it possible that the end of time of persecution, and we've dealt with a lot of that, as there will never, as Daniel says, Daniel 12, a time of persecution and trouble as has never been before. When we go through these troublous times and our faith is challenged, is the challenge only going to be to our minds, or is the challenge also going to be to our relationship? And which one will be the easiest to be convicted of, to change, if we're tempted by Satan? I don't think Satan is going to find many Sabbath keepers who are truly Sabbath keepers and know the Scriptures and know what it says from changing from the Sabbath. Here they won't change. My question is, what about here? And is it possible that many in that day will say, Lord, Lord, haven't we kept your Sabbath because we kept the right day? And He will say, I never knew you. Because what did you do on that day? I didn't have fellowship with you. You knew it was the right day. Yeah, you stayed away from work maybe, but I don't remember you inviting me over to spend some time with you. Satan is smarter than what we think. If he can't get you to falter on the quantity or correctness of the Sabbath, yes, I've kept 5,000 Sabbaths. It's 5,000 weeks, it's a long time, or 10,000 weeks Sabbaths. If he can't get us to falter on quantity or the correctness of the day, he will get you on the quality. Now, what do we mean by that? If you grew up keeping the Sabbath or even Sunday, you would all have a story to tell about how strict or lenient the Sabbath rules were in your home, right? You remember them? Jerry, what were you allowed to do when you were 9 or 10 years old on the Sabbath day after you milked the cow and you went to Sabbath? You had to go to Sabbath school. Rule number 1. Rule number 2, you had to go to the worship service after that and not wrestle with the pastor's son on the green lawn behind the church. Confession time. What is your story about the rules of the quality of how you kept the Sabbath growing up? Was worship a punishment to endure or a delight to enjoy? Was worship a punishment to endure or a delight to enjoy? Now let's get practical and get straight on and serious about that. Is the Sabbath really a happy day? When we say to each other, Happy Sabbath, what do we mean? Oh, it's just a phrase, Happy Sabbath. But they delight in the law of the Lord, meditating on it day and night, Psalm 1 verse 2. There in Isaiah 58 verse 13 it says, keep the Sabbath day holy, don't pursue your own interests on that day, but enjoy the Sabbath. Lord, how can I not pursue my own interest and enjoy? See what God is saying here? He's saying there must be some relationship here so that you have met me, to spend time with me to the extent that you like playing with my toys. God says, do you like playing with my toys? If you don't, you haven't spent enough time playing with my toys. Honor the Sabbath in everything you do on that day, and don't follow your own desires or talk idly. Then the Lord will be your delight. I will give you honor and satisfy you with inheritance I promised your ancestor Jacob. Now let me read that same verse, Psalm 58:13, in the New English Translation, which I told you early on. It really brings out that meaning of the context and the Hebrew. You must observe the Sabbath, right? Rather than doing anything you please on my holy day. You must look forward to the Sabbath. That's the enjoy or the delight. You must look forward. As a kid, I didn't always look forward to the Sabbath. Do I look forward to the Sabbath now? Oh, you bet. Do you look forward to the Sabbath? You must look forward to the Sabbath and treat the Lord's holy day with respect. What does that mean? You must treat it with respect by what? By refraining from your normal activities. Well, what can I do and what can't I do? We'd ask our dads. Your normal, everyday, today activities. And by refraining from your selfish pursuits. And here's the context of Isaiah 58. Remember, the people at that time in Jerusalem basically were either agricultural or they were buyers and sellers of goods. And so on the Sabbath day, the gates were closed and no commerce, traffic could go in or out of the city. The Sabbath day was a day for rest and no work, no normal activity. And so the New English Translation, the NET, translates this, and by refraining from your selfish pursuits, and where the other translations say, and from idle talk, it says, and from making business deals, because that is the context. The idle talk was actually about business. Oh, we come to church, we talk about the latest cars. Have you been to that car lot over there? Have you seen this on this website? Man alive, there's some real good deals there. Black Friday is past, but you know what? There's still some good deals on the internet. Cyber Monday is coming on. Did you know that? By refraining from your selfish pursuits and from making business deals, then you will find joy in your relationship to the Lord. Then you will find joy if you stop with your business talk and your selfish pursuits and your normal activities. That's what it's saying. You want delight in the Sabbath? You want to look forward to it? You want to enjoy it and really have a happy time? Then do away with your selfish pursuits, normal activities, and business thinking. And I will give you great prosperity and cause your crops to grow on the land I gave to your ancestor Jacob. That's the agricultural context that he brings in. Did you grow up with a list of do's and don'ts in your home about Sabbath keeping as I did? How did that Puritan legalism work for you, Jerry? Didn't work too good. Rules are good, right? Don't throw them out. But rules without a relationship is bad. You kids, go to your rooms and read a book and be quiet until I say you can come out. Just so that I can get some peace and quiet and maybe Daddy can have a nap. Shh. Get out of under my feet. I don't want relationship with you. I just want you out there. Do your own thing. What is the Sabbath for? I have an idea that for the end-time church, there's a challenge that I've not often heard preached. And I'm going to share some of this with you in the next few minutes we have. It starts with taking a closer look at what the word Sabbath means. The word Shabbat in the Hebrew talks about ceasing of activity or state, to stop, to cease, to be still, and be quiet. That is, have an activity no longer continue. Put an end to it. Stop it. Have a state or condition come up to end. And there are many scriptures that use the word Shabbat, not only the ones that we find translated Sabbath. It is, for instance, if you look at a verse like, I'm just going to give you one verse here about Sabbath. And of course, we know the word Sabbath means rest, but it also means stop. It also means cease. Proverbs 20 verse 3 says, it is an honor for a person to cease from strife. This is my translation, or the New English translation. It is an honor for a person to cease from strife. It is an honor for a person to Shabbat from strife. To rest from strife. To cease from strife. Do you see the meaning? To rest or to stop from strife. That's what it's saying. And every fool quarrels. Yeah, stop quarreling. In other words, Shabbat from your quarrels. Rest from your quarrels. Stop your quarrels. It also means to sit. It also means a place or location where you sit, a place of rest, a place where one lives. It can also refer to a throne seat and the act of sitting quietly. That's all involved in that word Shabbat. It refers to a state of dedication to rest and worship. All part of that verse. Satan knows that if we can keep the Sabbath-keeping people of God so busy that they will suffer from stress and anxiety and muscle pain and angina and nervousness and short of breath, then he's got us in a helpless, weak, exhausted state with very little quality of life and relationships, let alone quality Sabbath-keeping. Right? Satan knows. And I have not yet heard many sermons on the quality of Sabbath keeping and what it's there for. Satan has filled our lives with electronic tech gadgets, we know that keep our brains whizzing non-stop 24/7, and then you ask us to switch off all of those things, everyone, Pastor, and stop for 24 hours. How can that be possible? I'm 17 years old. I'm 47 or 57 or 67, and still I wonder, how can I do that? And all the things in my gates need to rest. Satan has taken a good thing, work, and made us believe that the harder we work, the longer hours we work, the more honorable and laudable we are. To be industrious and hardworking is a noble aspiration, right? The result, we become unbalanced, stressed out, worn out, burned out, and very susceptible to the devil's temptations. We give in and blame our circumstances. We could do nothing about it. Pastor, I could do nothing about it. I recently ordered a book called, just one word, Sabbath. Written by a non-Adventist author, and it touched me because one of our pastors, I think it was Dwight Nelson from Andrews, or someone quoted from this book, and I couldn't put it down, after starting reading this book. And he has said some profound things about the deeper meaning of the Sabbath. Things we as Sabbath keepers often miss seeing. Sometimes it takes a person from outside to look in and to see something we don't see. I can't help thinking to myself, what can a non-Adventist teach me about the Sabbath? I'm a Seventh-day Adventist pastor. Is there any non-Adventist that can teach me something about the Sabbath? I was humbled and surprised. Because this whole book does not talk about the right day, but an aspect that we sometimes miss, I sometimes miss, and that is the quality of Sabbath keeping on that day. I'm going to read you a few sentences or statements from this book. He says, in the relentless busyness of modern life, we have lost the rhythm between rest and work. Our culture invariably supposes that action and accomplishment are better than rest, that doing something, anything, is better than doing nothing. Is that right? In our drive for success, we are seduced by the promises of more money, more recognition, more satisfaction, more love, more information, more influence, more possessions, more security. Even when our intentions are noble and our efforts sincere, even when we dedicate our lives to the service of others, the corrosive pressure of frantic overactivity can nonetheless cause suffering in ourselves and others. He talks about a successful life has become a violent enterprise. He uses words that Adventist authors wouldn't use. The Chinese pictograph for busy is composed of two characters, heart and killing. Doctors, think of heart attacks. Wow. The word busy in Chinese, two pictures, the one is a heart and the other one is killing, to kill the heart. How did we get so terribly lost in a world saturated with striving and grasping, yet somehow bereft of joy and delight? I would suggest that it is this: we have forgotten the Sabbath, says this author. We have forgotten the Sabbath. Without rest, we respond from a survival mode where everything we meet assumes a terrifying prominence. We react with sloppy desperation. Sabbath time can be a revolutionary challenge to the violence of overwork and mindless accumulation and the endless multiplication of desires and responsibilities and accomplishments. Sabbath is a way of being in time where we remember who we are, remember what we know, and taste the gifts of spirit and eternity. Have we and are we as Adventists experiencing that spirit, the Holy Spirit, and in the light of eternity? Like a forest, a path in the forest, Sabbath creates a marker for ourselves. So if we are lost, we can find our way back to our center. And that center is Jesus Christ. The Sabbath is like a path in the forest, and the Sabbath creates a marker so that we can find our way back to our center. And that center is Jesus Christ. In Sabbath time, we remember to celebrate what is beautiful and sacred. We light candles and sing songs or tell stories. We eat, we nap. It's a time to let our work, our land, our animals lie fallow, to be nourished and refreshed. Sabbath is more than the absence of work. It is not just a day off when we can catch up on television or errands. While many of us are terribly weary, we have come to associate tremendous guilt and shame with taking time to rest. I feel so guilty. I have nothing to do. I can't just lie down. It drives me nuts. Our ADHD is just driving us along. Sabbath gives us permission. It commands us to stop. That's what the word Sabbath means. Stop. Cease. Wow. I have permission to stop. I'm giving you all, take it the right way, absolution. You can now stop from your frenzied running. Just take a break on the Sabbath and form some relationship. Give God some relationship time. Listen to this. That same author says something beautiful about it. He's talking about Israel surviving the exile. The author says, "It is not Israel that kept the Sabbath, but the Sabbath kept Israel." It is not the Sabbath. It's not Mac, Seventh-day Adventist Church, that keeps the Sabbath. It's the Sabbath that keeps Mac, Seventh-day Adventist Church. Much of modern life, of course, is specially designed to seduce our attention away from this inner place of refuge. I mean, in the time of trouble, at the end of time, what is the purpose of the Sabbath? The author here says the Sabbath is a refuge. What will be the refuge in the time of trouble if it isn't my relationship with Jesus Christ? Much of modern life, of course, is specifically designed to seduce us. When we are in the world with eyes wide open, the seductions are insatiable. Hundreds of channels of cable and satellite television, telephones, multiple lines, call waiting so we can talk to more than one person at one time, Fax machines, mail, email, and overnight mail, billboards, magazines, newspapers, radio, cell phones, etc. Every stimulus competes for our attention. Buy me, do me, watch me, try me, drink me, eat me, do me. It is as if we have inadvertently stumbled into some horrific wonderland, the author says. Sabbath time can become our refuge. During the Sabbath, we set aside a sanctuary of time. A sanctuary of time. Disconnect from the frenzy of consumption and accomplishment and consecrate a day as an offering for healing our distraught beings. Gandhi said, "There is more to life than merely increasing its speed." There's more to life than merely increasing its speed. We refuse to rest at our peril, and yet in a world where overwork is seen as a professional virtue, many of us feel we can legitimately be stopped only by physical illness or collapse. If we do not allow for a rhythm of rest in our overly busy lives, illness becomes our Sabbath. I've never heard an author say that before. Illness becomes our Sabbath. Our pneumonia, our cancer, our heart attack, our accidents create Sabbath for us, like it did for me a while ago when I landed up in Salem Hospital. It happened on a Friday night. I still don't know what happened to me. I still don't know why that happened. But now I think I've got an idea what God had in mind. He said, "Jerry, you need to stop. Your Sabbath is not a time of stopping. You're running like crazy. Stop. And if you don't stop, I'll give you a Sabbath in hospital." So you can experience that. Jesus, for whom anything was possible, did not offer 7 secret coping strategies to work faster, or 9 spiritual stress management techniques to enhance our effectiveness. He said, "Learn from me and you will find rest for your souls." Matthew 11:29. Let's stop the glorification of busy. We don't need to use our busyness as a measure of worthiness. This I just put in for our tech guys now. Young people, you've got to look at this now. Brianna, you've got to look at this one. Abby, you've got to look at this one. This is for you guys. It says, pick one day a week to turn off your tech and reboot your life. I thought this was just an interesting little, okay, you can see on Monday there, the guy is eating his sandwich. On Tuesday, he's driving with his GPS and everything else blaring. On Wednesday, he's working like crazy. On Thursday, he's standing in a line there at the post office or at the bank. On Friday, he's eating a sandwich again. And on Saturday, well, the tech Sabbath, this is the colored one. He leaves his phone behind when he goes out. Instead of getting into his Maserati, he gets on his bicycle. He takes some time to rest and ponder and meditate and be out in nature and do something with the kids. Take a tech Sabbath. The forgotten pleasures of a day of rest. Have we forgotten how to enjoy because we're so busy? Have we forgotten that the Sabbath is all about relationships? The perfect day for God's set-apart men to lead their families into a deeper understanding of His ways. Deuteronomy 6, fathers, husbands, this is especially to the priest of the home. The Sabbath is a time given to you. You don't have to worry about your work. It's a time for you to be the mentor, spiritual mentor to your family on that day, especially. What does Jesus do? Matthew 14:23, after he had dismissed them, he went up on the mountainside by himself to pray. And when evening came, he was there alone. Jesus works and then he dismisses them. Some of us can't dismiss. As long as people are knocking at our door, we feel pumped up. We feel energized because this is stroking my ego, Pastor. Luke 5, and there verse 15, yet the news about him spread all the more, so the crowds of people came to hear him and to be healed of their sicknesses. But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and did what? He had a fellowship relationship with his Father and prayed and talked to him. The Sabbath can only begin, this is a statement that you need to listen to. The Sabbath can only begin if we close the factory, turn out the lights, turn off the computer, and withdraw from the concerns of the marketplace. When we cease our daily labor, other things, love, friendship, prayer, touch, singing, rest, can be born in space created by our rest. We need to stop doing stuff so there's space to enjoy relationship with Jesus. If you work all week and forget to rest, you will become brittle and hard and lose precious nourishment and joy. Forgetting the Sabbath is like leaving that unwrapped gift under the Christmas tree. And I look at it, but I never open it. I never open it. How do you like that? Would you want a Christmas tree with a gift under there that somebody put there for you? But all you do with it is you just look at it. You just look at it. Thank you for being our shepherd, leading us to quiet waters, to green pastures, where we can find rest in you. Teach us, Lord, how to fellowship with you on your Sabbath day. May we become so in love with Jesus that we look forward and can't wait for the Sabbath to come. May we build our relationship with you so close and so intimate that we will long to see you. And may the Sabbath in that way become a refuge in a time of trouble. May you come soon, we pray in Jesus' name.